featured question 2 is a doctor wrote and said, I was confused by a statement in the Inflammation and the Adaptive Immune System webinar that TH2 or humoral immunity only works against non-living things and parasites. I've always heard that humoral antibody immunity was the backup when cellular immunity didn't work fast enough. And a number of sources that I'm aware of state that antibodies are produced against viruses and bacteria. What am I missing? Well, what was being missed there was, in that concept that the doctor was presenting, was that we have both TH1 and TH2 polarizations are always working at the same time. It's not just TH1 or TH2, they're both present. And the antibodies produced by a TH2 response are necessary to tag the pathogens or the offenders so that the TH1 cells, the phagocytes, are guided toward them. And so what we see is that it's not just the TH1 or TH2, it's both working at the same time, but it's the balance between the two, the seesaw or teeter-totter balance. And what we'll see then is we have the cellular response or the phagocytosis of the TH1 response, and also at the same time these white blood cells are producing reactive oxygen species, ROS, or free radicals, which can cause tissue destruction in some cases. And that's the TH1 pattern, balanced by the TH2 pattern, which is the immunoglobulin response or the allergic response, and histamine and other inflammatory mediators are produced. So if we look at this a little bit more thoroughly, we see we have an antigen-presenting cell. Now, the antigen-presenting cell is often a dendritic cell, occasionally a macrophage, but mostly most of the time it's a dendritic cell which has phagocytized a substance, and it creates a process of antigen presentation to the naive T cell or the TH0 cell here. And then what's happened is, depending on the type of substance, of antigen that has been phagocytized by this dendritic cell or this antigen presenting cell, it produces, goes through a process of creating something, a major histocompatibility complex 1 or 2, and then it processes this antigen. And then if it's a living thing, such as a bacteria or a virus or a fungus, interleukin 12 is produced, and the naive T cell on antigen presentation is converted to a TH1 cell, which then causes the so-called cellular response or phagocytosis and reactive oxygen species, which can also result in tissue destruction and phagocytosis of the bug or the pathogen. If, however, the antigen presenting cell presents with a phagocytized food or airborne allergen, typically these are things that are seen in hollow spaces, like the gut as a hollow space, or the sinuses are hollow space, or airborne allergens can be in the sinuses or sometimes in the lungs. Then we get the major histocompatibility complex, MHC effect is presenting to the naive T cell interleukin 4, which then polarizes the potential towards the TH2 cell. Now, this doesn't mean that the TH1 cells aren't also working, but the major promotion is towards a TH2 pathway in these non-living things or parasites. The major polarization taking place in the presence of viruses or bacteria or fungi is a polarization towards a TH1 cell and towards phagocytosis, but it doesn't mean there isn't also a lesser effect toward the TH2 cell to make the immunoglobulins or the antibodies. So what we see is in a TH1 polarization, which is primarily to living things, we get the TH1 polarization and the phagocytosis response to the reactive oxygen species. What we get in the food or an airborne or also in parasites response is we get a primary TH2 response, which causes immunoglobulins to be produced. But both of these are going on at the same time. So even in a food reaction, we get a TH1 response, and even in a bug reaction, we get a TH2 response, creating the immunoglobulins. So this teeter-totter or seesaw type balance is favoring the primary TH2 response that occurs with living things in, primary TH1 response that we get in living things. So it's the teeter-totter balance favoring the primary TH1 response that occurs with living things, except for most parasites. And this pattern then is, in this pattern, of a TH1 response to most living things, but we still get antibodies, it's just less. However, simultaneously with the TH1 polarization, there is a TH2 antibody response, though far less than the TH1 response to help get rid of the bugs. The parasites and other hollow organ stressors like food in the gut and airbornes in the sinuses, the lungs, and the respiratory tract will initiate a TH2 response primarily, but there's also still a bit of a TH1 response. It's just that the TH2 response is the primary response. So we get this balance between TH1 and TH2 favoring one way or the other, but both responses are going on at the same time. Subsequently, the TH2 response results in B cells converting into plasma cells. The plasma cells produce antibodies. In the case of allergic responses, the antibodies stimulate mast cell degranulation. So what we see then is we have this TH2 response that is occurring as a primary response to food allergies and a secondary response to viruses, fungi, and bacteria, creating a B cell, and the B cell activation from the TH2 cell creates antibodies and allergic response in the inflammatory mediators, as we see here. So the T cells in a TH2 response, TH2 cells stimulate B cells to become plasma cells that produce the immunoglobulins or the antibodies. TH2 cells activate the B cells to become plasma cells, which produce the antibodies. And this happens primarily in the TH2 response, but also happens lesser in effect in a TH1 response. So the role of the mast cells in the development of allergy in a TH2 response is we have the this is a review from the immune webinars that we did. The pollen will come into contact with the B cell, which will then cause the B cell to make plasma cells, make antibodies, which will activate, antibodies will attach to a mast cell. So the plasma cell produced antibodies, in this case the IgE and the TH2 response, attaches to the mast cells, and then the second time that a person has a brush with the same antigen, these IgE primed mast cells release granules and powerful chemical mediators such as histamine and cytokines into the environment. That's mast cell degranulation. You see these degranulation here. These chemicals are then creating the symptoms. The histamine and other chemicals are the chemical mediators that create the characteristic symptoms of allergies. So this is what we see in a TH2 response, is the allergic response. And so B lymphocytes create plasmas or become plasma cells under the influence of the TH2 polarization to produce antibodies. But this process is also going on to a much lesser extent, but still present, an important process in a TH1 polarization. This antibody production is happening. It's just in a TH2 polarization, it's the primary response. TH1 polarization, the phagocytosis is the primary response. The B lymphocytes also create memory cells, which create long-term immunity and development of immunological memory. Each pathogen then is remembered in a TH1 response we still have, or in a TH2 response we still have these memory cells produced, and each pathogen or allergen is remembered by a signature antibody. Memory cells are produced, and memory cells can quickly eliminate a pathogen should subsequent infections occur. So once again, both TH1 and TH2 responses are going on at the same time. There's just a favoritism towards the TH1 response in viruses, bacteria, and fungal infections, and a favoritism towards the TH2 response in allergies, airborne or food allergies, or some toxic responses as well, and also in the case of parasites. So we have the B cells then creating the memory cells. So the TH2 response is going to be primarily towards B cells, which are create plasma cells to make antibodies, and memory cells so the pathogen can be recognized in a future subsequent contact. The innate immune system is the rapid response system. It's the very rapid response system that happens right away, but it's only a generic response mediated by the complement pathway, and this response creates an inflammatory cascade and some phagocytosis. But it's the same for every non-self thing that it recognizes. And it's the adaptive immune system that has the very higher level response that we see in humans and in higher vertebrates. So the cells of the innate immune cells are the macrophages, the mast cells, the basophils, the monocytes, neutrophils, and the dendritic cells, these starfish-shaped cells. And it's this dendritic cell, which is a primarily one, and also secondary, the macrophage, which phagocytizes, which you see happening here and here. But it's the dendritic cell primarily that causes the antigen-presenting cell to activate the naive TH0 cells. So arguably the most important effect of the innate immune system is to activate the adaptive immune system by directing naive TH cells into one of the previously mentioned polarizations. Usually TH1 or TH2 in the response that we're talking about, as we've been talking about, there are actually 7 different polarizations, including TH17 for autoimmunity and the T reg cell for more of an anti-inflammatory effect or an immune tolerating effect, which we've talked about in the past as well. But there are 3 other ones that can take place, which we're not really going to address here. So we have the TH1, TH2 response. They're both going on at the same time. There's just a balance between the two.